This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to Street Knowledge. I am Chris Graham, and I've got on the phone with me Scott Sherman. And Scott, out of our talk today, normally we talk GBA sports. This is kind of talking GBA sports, talking ACC sports, and particularly the news from yesterday, the fallout coming still today, and who knows where else it's going to go with this FBI investigation, announcement of arrest of several assistant coaches, others involved in funneling players from AAU teams to colleges to agents as guys turn professional. And this has already had some fallout with the University of Louisville as Rick Pitino, officially he's on unpaid leave. Unofficially, he's out the door. His attorney even saying this is the end of Rick Pitino at Louisville. Also, the athletics director there. Scott, this is huge news. I don't think we even have any sense right now where the fallout's going to be with this, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. But for your first thoughts as we digest this news.
Why are we surprised? I mean, really, we've both followed college basketball for a long time. Unfortunately, me being older than you, I outrank you in how long, but I've seen this coming for a long time, Chris, and with recruits being illegally recruited, kids getting into colleges that shouldn't have been accepted. I mean, this is no shocker to me, and I think the dominoes are just starting to fall. This could be the most significant event that's ever happened to the NCAA men's basketball, especially at the Division I level. But again, I'm absolutely not surprised that this is happening. It's been going on. We know it's been going on, and this is just the tip of the iceberg.
I was explaining to my wife, who was asking me to tell her what was going on, because it's complicated. For those who don't follow college sports, like a lot of us, both Scott and I and a lot of you guys listening out there do, what's the crime here? Well, the crime here is that sneaker companies, the apparel companies, for many years, dating back at least 20 years, probably longer than that, have been funding AAU teams where they've been attracting the top talents to play on the summer circuit for them in AAU ball. That's where college coaches tend to get their recruiting contacts these days. It's not through your high school coach. A lot of these kids don't even play for public high schools anymore. They play for those elite academies, the Oak Hills and places like that. But the AAU coaches tend to funnel players to the colleges. And so those AAU teams sponsored by the likes of Adidas, who's gotten caught up in this dragnet. I don't think they're going to be the only ones caught up in this. But then the apparel companies and sneaker companies also then sponsor college programs. And they're providing the shoes and the apparel, the uniforms, everything else. And then, of course, they get to sell those to the general public, and that's where they make their money. But then also, of course, those shoe companies then outfit NBA teams and other pro teams as well. And so what is alleged here is that coaches have been taking money, assistant coaches at least, as we know right now, taking money to place players in certain college programs, funneling some of that money to parents to help facilitate that, and then also taking money to then guide those players to certain sports agents. And so there's just, Scott, you're right. We've known this all along. This is not a secret. What we learned yesterday, as we're recording this, is not the only secret to this, I guess, is that finally the FBI got involved, not the NCAA, which has turned its eyes from this for many, many years. The FBI got involved, and now there are arrests. You can only presume that these guys, these first 10 guys who've been arrested, are going to have the screws turned on them to give up other guys. And this news is going to keep on giving for quite a while, I have to presume.
Oh, well, you said you nailed it. The NCAA. This is not one of those NCAA investigations that's kind of wink, wink. We'll slap your wrist and and let it go on, slip by. This is being done by the FBI. So what's going to happen is these college coaches, they're going to be these assistants that have been charged. They're going to sit down with the FBI, and the FBI is going to say, start naming names at these shoe companies, or you're going to be facing some pretty hefty prison time. And then you're going to see how quick they start squawking. And then once they get the names at the shoe companies, they're going to turn the screws on these shoe company reps just as tight to start naming schools, start naming assistant coaches. So, the FBI is good at what they do, and this is going to be a tremendous investigation that's, I'm afraid, is not going to be pretty when it's all over with. But again, how could we not be surprised with this? We've suspected it. Other things have gone on. I guess it's one thing. This just proves how worthless the NCAA governing body of men's college basketball and all sports proves kind of how useless they really are.
Yeah, I heard. I couldn't tell you who it was. I've had ESPN all day in the office, kind of listening as I'm doing other work. And one of the writers in one of the many panel discussions about this today said this could be the end of the NCAA as we know it, or at least the beginning of the end of the NCAA as we know it, for the very reason you just stated there, Scott, that how worthless is the NCAA when we've all known for many years. The way this came about was there was somebody in one of the shoe companies who was sloppy, got involved in some money laundering, and the FBI used him to turn the screws, basically had him turn state evidence, indicted him in secret, and then had him wear a wire, and that led to some others. What we heard about just this week is still, the FBI says this is very much an ongoing investigation, and four assistant coaches named, but then, Louisville got caught into it. No assistant coaches there yet, at least named. We do have a lot of speculation as to the identity of an assistant coach there. Also, Miami caught up in this, apparently. I'm not sure if it's the Jim Larinaga regime or his predecessor, Frank Hayes. We'll get more details there. South Carolina also apparently caught up in this, a Final Four team from last year. And one estimate, one of the writers in a roundtable on ESPN today suggested that as many as 100 programs could end up getting caught up in this. Holy crap, 100. There's 350, roughly 351, I think, Division I programs. As many as 100 programs could end up getting caught up in this. College basketball as we know it may not be the same as this continues to unravel.
Oh, I agree, 100%. Chris, earlier today I went back and I looked up NCAA death sentences or death penalties, whatever, and I looked at some of the programs down through the years, all the way back to the mid-'80s when the Southern Methodist University football team was given the death penalty for continuing recruiting violations. Many other schools were given not necessarily the high-profile sports, basketball, football, but other schools, if you look it up, you'll see that there's been multiple schools given the so-called death penalty, and for violations that, on the paper anyway, appear to be significantly less severe than what is allegedly going on or has been going on at these schools. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how deep this goes. But with the FBI involved, I think we're going to get to the very, very root of it, and it's not going to take that long either.
And we've been talking generally about schools across the landscape, specifically with Louisville today. Scott and I were having a discussion on Facebook last night, and Scott was, I think to a degree you were hitting it on the head. Saying that there actually will be fallout from this, and I was as cynical as I could be. there've been, it's kind of like the old saying, hey, Carolina and Duke got accused of something. Let's put Valdosta State on probation, and that'll kind of answer the question there. I really didn't think anything. Now, this is what Louisville did today is not an NCAA action. It was a Louisville action, but you have to presume that they did what they did at the school there to try to forestall a possible death penalty, right? Pitino accused and slapped on the wrist a couple of years ago related to the stripper in the dorm issue with recruits. And
they're already on probation.
They're already on probation as far as that goes. Yeah, they preemptively gave up a postseason appearance 1 year. I think it was 2 years ago.
Right.
They did that, and so easily now the dreaded words in NCAA investigations: lack of institutional control. When two major scandals like this come back to back, that's why Louisville's falling on its sword now, getting rid of the highest paid basketball coach in the nation, getting rid of an athletics director who, he presides over a program that had a baseball team in the World Series, his football team has a Heisman Trophy winner, his basketball program is one of the best in the country, and he's gone. They're basically saying, we're falling on the sword. That's a major falling on the sword. That's not, let's fire the women's assistant soccer coach. This is, we're getting rid of the AD and getting rid of Rick Pitino. That tells you probably Louisville knows more than we do right now. The folks there behind the scenes know more than we do, and they know it's even worse than what we know. I have to presume that.
Oh, I do too. And I think this is falling on the sword, but how about shutting the barn door out because the cattle has already gone? They're going to probably get the death penalty. I don't know how the NCAA to have any credibility could not possibly give them a death penalty for this. This is just a blatant misuse of their powers. It's, they continuously do it. I'm pretty sure the Louisville officials realize this too, and it wouldn't be surprising to see them voluntarily shut the program down, maybe thinking they can voluntarily do it for a year or two, might circumvent an indefinite amount of time. So, yeah, and Chris, too, I was thinking, how much of this, because we know the shoe companies are trying to get to the players as early as possible.
Mm-hmm.
It was reported that LeBron James had a shoe deal in place before he ever graduated from high school. Well, LeBron James played at a time before this silly, absolutely no sense rule that says a high school kid has to play a year of college basketball.
Mm-hmm.
How much of this can be contributed to that? Because these shoe companies are getting after these kids as seniors in high school so that they hopefully will continue that relationship with that player after that 1 year of being enrolled. I'm not going to say it being out of school because we all know that 1 year they go to very few, if any, classes.
Mm-hmm.
How much of it could be prevented if you just let the high school kids go straight to the pros?
At least those 8 to 10 most years guys who are potentials, because that was the case. I think it was Kevin Garnett and Kobe Bryant back in 95, 96, one of those 2 years that kind of opened the floodgates for, that period. Maybe it was a 10-year period or so where there were a number of high school kids going straight to the NBA draft. And it started with those two guys. And, LeBron James and one of those guys, there were also a lot of busts. And that's where it was the late run of busts of those straight to the NBA guys that got the NBA and NCAA working together to try to, implement this one and done rule that's clearly not good for anybody. And it's not the case with either of the other two major sports. With baseball, for example. Now, baseball players can be drafted and sign professional contracts out of high school. They, of course, don't go straight to the major leagues. It's a number of years before a high school draft pick in baseball ends up in the big leagues, if ever, because of the difficulty of making it from rookie league all the way up to 4A level. But if you don't go into the draft and sign with a team after your high school career is over, you can't then go back into the draft until after your junior season. And, you know, we as UVA fans listening to this, we know a lot of guys who got drafted after their junior seasons. And football, same thing. You have to be out of high school at least, I think it's 3 years. And that's whether it's redshirt sophomore or your junior season. And so, because the NFL doesn't want guys who aren't physically ready to play in the NFL. But basketball, you know, allowing these guys either as high school players or as 19-year-old college freshmen to go to the NBA, certainly has been an issue for quality of both those leagues, both the NCAA suffers because Kentucky reloads every year, Duke now reloads every year, and you know, also the NBA ends up with players who are much less polished. Yeah, it's I don't know what the solution is there, and certainly the money is a factor too, and you know, I guess I can say this: I don't know if the NCAA or NBA is going to have the final solution here. I think the FBI, the other set of initials, they'll have the final solution here, because what this has to do, and of course, again, we keep saying this, and I think it's going to be very true. This is the tip of the iceberg, what we've heard so far. But man, I tell you what, as soon as these indictments come down, as soon as trials happen, as soon as guys get thrown into prison, that's going to have a chilling effect on those shoe companies, those AAU teams, those AAU coaches, those assistant coaches wanting to cheat to throw guys to agents. Because, you know, guys in prison, that's the NCAA. The NCAA can sanction you. You go get a job somewhere else, whatever. Prison's prison, and that's gonna be a different thing.
Absolutely, and that's why there's going to be people very willing to drop dimes on other people. But you know, back to the rules of college baseball, college football. Is it not maybe because they have those rules in effect, and they don't have that silly you have to go to college 1 year? Maybe, now I'm not saying that those sports are pure and that there's no recruiting infractions or anything like that doesn't go on, but maybe that's why you don't hear about the shoe deals, and maybe that's why that's not as much of a problem in college football and college basketball, because they're not looking to give a high school senior, they're not trying to steer him to a particular college, because it's going to be 3 years before in baseball that they can ever get their hands on him. And football the same way. So again, I just can't help to believe that a lot of this coming about because of that absolutely no rule that says a high school senior cannot play for the NBA, but they must go through the charade that they're a college student for 1 year.
Yeah, it's and we all know the total charade. Second semester of their first year, they're taking, if any, classes, 1 or 2, just to nominally be students. Yeah, I think you're right, Scott. It's that longevity between your high school career and your potential pro career. There is 3 or 4 years there before anything can be translated into money. And, of course, also in football, you're always one play away from being a single football player. Baseball, if you can't hit a curveball, if you can't throw a curveball, the great high school stars don't always translate into college stars or pro stars. In basketball, though, it's I don't want to say it's easier, because a lot of us love basketball, and it's a sport that's difficult to play at the top level, but it's easier perhaps to identify talent, especially that top talent, and see it get to that level pretty quickly. And we mentioned the LeBron James and Kobe Bryant and Kevin Garnett of the world as great examples of those guys who went straight to the NBA. And probably could have gone after their sophomore or junior seasons of high school. Yeah, it's you know, the I guess the overriding factor too seems to me just so much money in sports. So Jay Williams was on Outside the Lines today talking. They had a panel of he and Seth Greenberg were involved, 2 guys from their game day show in the fall and winter. And Jay said, hey, you know, part of this is guys like Seth used to get paid $70,000 or $80,000 a year to coach teams. Now they're getting paid a few million a year to coach teams. Schools put so much pressure on because of the TV money that's involved, because of all the ticket money that's involved. I'll just say UVA is one of the actual top 20 programs nationally, overall athletics programs. It brought in over $100 million last year. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of money involved in college athletics. And as a result, there's a lot of pressure to make that money. And, those coaches who cut corners have been doing so and doing so without repercussions for years. And now there's finally repercussions, at least in some capacity. And I guess for those of us listening and talking here who follow UVA sports closely, I guess if there's any saving grace, it's that we don't suspect any of our guys, certainly, to say the least, of being involved in anything like this. It's almost to the detriment of them that, because of the academic standards of the University of Virginia, the integrity of those guys and involved in they don't recruit the athletes who are going to be one and done. And Virginia's never trafficked in that field, and so we're one of those fan bases not worried about this news, but there are plenty of them out there that are.
Yeah, and looking back, Rick Pitino's probably his career is going to end in symbols, but he's going to walk away with probably $40 million owed to him by the University of Louisville. So hopefully not too many people out there are really feeling bad for Pitino. And there's a lot of other Pitino-likes out there in the college basketball world. In the same state of Kentucky, John Calipari is not by any means considered to be a choir boy.
Yeah.
And you got to wonder how many of these other coaches, knowing what we just said, the people are they're going to name names. So if you're out there and you're one of these schools that are heavily involved in this, do you just sit back and sweat it out, or do you just go ahead and throw yourself on the sword now and admit your guilt before the FBI comes knocking on your door?
And so the last aspect of this story to cover is the players on the current Louisville roster. Now, Louisville is a team that, when you look at the early renderings of top 25s, is a team that's considered to be a top 10, top 15 program this year by most observers. Now, when Penn State went through its issues football-wise a few years ago, and when the Sandusky scandal, the Paterno forced out a version of a death penalty was given to Penn State, and the NCAA pulled back on it a bit. But if you remember, those players were given the option of transferring out without repercussion, without having to lose the year of eligibility, without having to sit out a year. Basically, players were able to go play where they wanted to play right away. It's a fair question now. If Louisville is facing what it seems it is facing, should recruits, for example, should players on the current roster be allowed to transfer out? And of course, the semester's already started. It's already almost October now, so that may be difficult to accomplish at least this semester. But could that program be ripped up now, or at the end of the first semester, or at the end of the year? And then where those teams go, obviously, strange how it may be, Scott, they had two of the top recruits for class 2018 already committed to them, including one who seems to be tied to this scandal. So, yeah, a lot of questions about in the here and now what happens in Louisville this season. Practice starts not too long, I think a couple weeks away.
And that one particular did not sign until June, and he's already been declared ineligible, or
right.
Louisville has come out again, shut it after the cattle have long gone. They have said that one particular recruit is not going to be eligible to practice or play. So, what does he do? Does he walk away? I mean, he's certainly not going to stay at that program. But again, he was a player, one of the top players in the country. He wasn't going to play there, but for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think that a lot of this, in my opinion, could maybe not completely avoided, but letting these kids just if they're ready to play in the NBA and they can then let them go right out of high school. If you've got a computer whiz that's 18 years old and graduates from high school, and Apple Computer wants to pay him $300,000 a year to start the day after he graduates, should he have to go and work, or should he have to go to college for a year?
Right.
I mean, that's a rule that the NBA wanted just because it helped them evaluate those players a little better.
Right. Yeah, and it's certainly, that's a solution, a fair question. So much a question with this, and I guess it's good for us as we talk primarily about UVA sports here that we don't have to worry about this. This is more about, now there are 2 ACC members that do have to worry about this, and that certainly impacts UVA. So more to come as far as that goes down the road. Well, I think we'll wrap up the podcast for now. UVA football on an off week this week, so we'll kind of limp into the weekend with them in that sense, rest and relax a little bit and get ready for Keith in a couple weeks. But yeah, the basketball news certainly primary. Go to AvestriPress.com for more on this. Also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, etc. As we try to keep folks updated on the latest on this scandal. For Scott German, I'm Chris Graham, signing off. Have a great day, everybody.